You're not cut out for business, little brother. Pack your things. My name is Vincent Romano. I'm 45 years old, and until that Tuesday morning, I was the operations director of Romano's Fine Dining, a chain of 12 upscale restaurants across the Pacific Northwest. Caroline said this with a smug leaning against the mahogany desk that had belonged to our father. I simply replied, "Congratulations on your promotion." For 18 years, I'd been ensuring our kitchens ran smoothly, our staff stayed motivated, and customers kept coming back. Not glamorous, but the foundation that kept everything standing. Caroline had always been the face of the company. Charming investors posing for magazines, giving interviews about innovative concepts. 6 years younger, MBA from Stanford, our father's obvious favorite for the spotlight. While she talked strategy in boardrooms, I lived in kitchens, learning recipes, training chefs, solving crises. The morning of her promotion, I sat across from the board in our corporate conference room. Caroline entered wearing designer attire, carrying herself like she'd already won. Chairman Harrison Westfield cleared his throat. After careful consideration, the board has decided Romano's needs fresh leadership to navigate the changing restaurant landscape. I kept my expression neutral. I'd seen this coming for months. Private meetings Caroline had been having with board members, consultant reports questioning my traditional management style, her excluding me from strategic sessions. Caroline will assume CEO role effective immediately, Harrison continued. We believe her vision for digital transformation and brand modernization is exactly what Romano's needs. Caroline's smile was radiant as the board members congratulated her. When Harrison asked if I had any comments, I simply said, "I wish Caroline success in her new role." After the meeting, Caroline followed me to my office. The same office where our father taught me about profit margins and food costs when I was 16. Working summers as prep cook. "Vincent, I know this might be disappointing," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't concerned about my feelings. "But I need to build my own team, people who share my vision." I continued packing, carefully placing the framed photo of our first restaurant into a box. "What vision did you have in mind?" "Modernization, automation. We can't keep running restaurants like it's 1995. She checked her nails. "I've spoken with consultants about streamlining operations. They think we can cut food costs 30% and reduce staff by 40% across all locations." I paused, a coffee mug halfway to the box. 40% staff reduction? Restaurant margins are razor thin, Vincent. We need to be more efficient. She moved toward the window, gazing out at the city skyline. The board agrees we're competing with chains that have perfected the formula: consistent portions, predictable costs, maximum profit per square foot. If you're enjoying watching corporate family dynamics explode in real time, hit that subscribe button, because Caroline's about to learn that some knowledge can't be replaced by consultants and spreadsheets. "And the recipes?" I asked quietly. The techniques that made Romano's different from every other chain restaurant. Caroline waved dismissively. "We'll maintain the core brand identity, but frankly, most customers can't tell the difference between artisan preparation and efficient standardization. The profit margins tell the real story." I finished packing in silence. As I prepared to leave, Caroline's expression softened slightly, probably realizing she should show some family sentiment. "Look, I know this is hard. Dad always said you were the heart of Romano's operations, but hearts don't show up on quarterly earnings reports." She paused. "I'll make sure your severance package reflects your years of service." I picked up my box and headed toward the door. "That's very generous of you, Caroline. Where will you go? I mean, what will you do now?" I turned back one last time. "I suppose I'll figure something out." That evening, I sat in my downtown apartment staring at a document I'd kept in my safe for 3 years. A document Caroline had never seen, never even knew existed. something our father had prepared during his final illness when he'd grown concerned about the direction Caroline wanted to take the business. The next morning, Caroline called an all-hands meeting at our flagship restaurant. I watched from across the street as employees filed into the dining room, confusion evident on their faces. Through the windows, I could see Caroline at the front of the room, presenting her restructuring plan with the same enthusiasm she'd once shown for her college debate tournaments. My phone buzzed with a text from Sofia Rodriguez, our head chef at the downtown location. Emergency meeting. Caroline talking about replacing recipes with optimized alternatives. Kitchen staff freaking out. I typed back, "Stay calm. Things will work out." Another text came from Tony Benedetti, our longest-serving manager. She wants to fire half the floor staff and replace them with automated ordering systems. 18 years I've been here. Never thought I'd see this. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I walked to my car and drove to the office of Patricia Hammond, the lawyer who'd handled our family's business affairs for over 2 decades. "Vincent," Patricia said as I entered her conference room, "I was wondering when you'd come to see me." I placed the document from my safe on the table between us. "It's time." Patricia reviewed the papers carefully, though I knew she'd helped draft them years earlier. "Your father was very specific about the conditions. Are you certain Caroline has met the triggering criteria? Mass layoffs, recipe standardization, and operational changes that fundamentally alter the character of Romano's restaurants." I met her gaze. "She announced all 3 yesterday." Patricia nodded slowly. "Then, according to the trust documents your father established, ownership of Romano's fine dining transfers from the family trust to you personally. Caroline's voting shares become non-voting advisory shares. What about the board? The board was elected based on Caroline's majority control through the family trust. Once ownership transfers, you have the authority to reconstitute the board entirely." Patricia leaned forward. "Vincent, are you prepared for what this means? Caroline will contest this. She'll claim the triggering events haven't actually occurred yet." I thought about Sophia's text, about Tony's 18 years of service, about the recipes our father had spent decades perfecting. "She made her first staff cuts this morning. The documentation is already in place." That afternoon, I received a call from Harrison Westfield. "Vincent, we need to talk. There's been some confusion about ownership structures." "No confusion on my end, Harrison. I assume Caroline shared the news about the trust transfer?" "This is highly irregular. The board wasn't informed about any conditional ownership arrangements. The board wasn't involved in the estate planning process. That was between family members and our attorney." I paused. "I'll be calling a board meeting for tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. "Vincent, I don't think you understand the implications." "I understand perfectly. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. The next morning, I arrived at Romano's corporate offices to find Caroline waiting in the lobby, arms crossed, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits I didn't recognize. "Vincent, we need to settle this ridiculous misunderstanding immediately," she said without preamble. "What misunderstanding would that be?" "This trust nonsense. Dad was sick when he signed those papers, clearly not thinking rationally." Her voice was tight, with controlled anger. "My lawyers are prepared to contest any documentation that wasn't properly witnessed or notarized." I smiled politely. "Patricia Hammond notarized everything personally. Your friend Harrison was actually one of the witnesses, along with Dr. Martinez, who can testify that Dad was completely lucid during the signing." Caroline's confidence wavered for a moment. "Even if the trust is valid, the triggering conditions are subjective. You can't prove I fundamentally altered Romano's character." "Actually, I can." I handed her a folder. "Photos from yesterday's staff meeting, copies of the consulting report you referenced, documentation of the recipe changes you approved, time-stamped employee termination notices." One of her lawyers whispered something in her ear. She shook her head sharply. "This is a hostile takeover disguised as family estate planning," she said loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "You've been plotting this for years." I've been protecting what Dad built for years. I kept my voice level. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. You're welcome to attend. The conference room was tense when I entered. Several board members looked confused, others seemed irritated at being summoned on short notice. Harrison Westfield sat at the head of the table, clearly uncomfortable. Let's address the elephant in the room, I began, taking a seat directly across from Caroline. Yesterday, the new CEO initiated changes that triggered a conditional ownership transfer outlined in our father's estate planning. Caroline leaned forward. Vincent is misrepresenting legal documents to stage a corporate coup. The board should reject these claims entirely. Patricia Hammond entered the room carrying a briefcase. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to clarify the legal situation regarding Romano's fine dining ownership structure. For the next 30 minutes, Patricia methodically explained the trust arrangement our father had established. The conditions for transfer had been very specific. Any attempt to fundamentally change Romano's recipes, implement mass layoffs, or convert the restaurants to a standardized chain model would trigger immediate ownership transfer to me. The triggering events have all occurred within the past 72 hours, Patricia concluded. Vincent Romano is now the sole owner of Romano's Fine Dining, with full authority to reconstitute the board and reverse any operational changes implemented since Monday. Harrison cleared his throat. This is highly unusual. The board made decisions in good faith based on the ownership structure we understood to be in place. And those decisions can be reversed, I replied. Caroline implemented changes without board approval, using emergency CEO powers that no longer apply. Caroline slammed her hand on the table. This is ridiculous. I spent 2 years developing the modernization plan. The consulting fees alone cost us $200,000. Money you didn't have the authority to spend once the trust conditions were triggered, Patricia noted calmly. The room fell silent. I could see the board members processing the implications. Several were probably calculating how this would affect their own positions. What are your intentions? Harrison asked carefully. First, rescind all termination notices issued this week. Full reinstatement for any employee who was laid off. I looked directly at Caroline. Second, return to our original recipes and preparation methods. Third, cancel any contracts with consulting firms that haven't provided tangible value. Caroline's face was pale now. You can't just undo strategic business decisions because you disagree with them. I can undo bad business decisions that threaten to destroy everything our father built. I stood up. The board is dismissed. I'll be reconstituting with members who understand the restaurant business rather than just financial engineering. As the board members filed out, Caroline remained seated, staring at the table. When we were alone, she finally looked up. How long have you known about the trust conditions? Dad told me 3 months before he died, when you started talking about turning Romano's into another generic chain restaurant. I sat back down across from her. He was proud of you, Caroline, your education, your ambition, but he was terrified you'd lose sight of what made Romano's special. And what's that supposed to mean? It means recipes passed down through 3 generations matter more than cost efficiency. It means Sofia Rodriguez knowing every customer's favorite dish matters more than automated ordering systems. It means the difference between running a restaurant and running a food factory. Caroline was quiet for a long moment. What happens to me now? You still own advisory shares, you're still family, but operational decisions stay with people who understand that restaurants are about more than profit margins. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our flagship restaurant watching Sofia train a new sous chef on our traditional ossobuco preparation. The technique couldn't be learned from a manual or replicated by machines. It required patience, intuition, and genuine respect for the craft. Tony Benedetti approached with the evening's reservation list. Fully booked again tonight, 3rd week in a row. I nodded, reviewing the numbers. Our return to traditional methods had initially cost more, but customer satisfaction scores were higher than they'd been in years. Food critics had noticed the difference. More importantly, our staff was motivated again. Caroline had taken a position with a tech startup in Seattle, using her MBA to help restaurants implement digital ordering systems. We spoke occasionally, mostly about family matters. The bitterness had faded into something resembling mutual respect. My phone buzzed with a text from our newest location manager. Grand opening exceeded projections by 40%, kitchen staff performing flawlessly. I smiled, remembering Caroline's prediction that customers couldn't tell the difference between artisan preparation and efficient standardization. She'd been wrong about that, just like she'd been wrong about what it took to run a restaurant that people actually wanted to visit. Sometimes protecting what matters means being prepared for the moment when someone tries to destroy it. Our father had understood that. He'd known Caroline's ambitions could either elevate Romano's or erase everything that made it worth preserving. Standing in that kitchen, surrounded by the sounds and smells of genuine cooking, I knew we'd chosen correctly. Some things can't be optimized or automated. They can only be preserved by people who understand their true value.